This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news, the American ambassador to Libya has died in that violence against the U.S. consulate that began yesterday. His name is Chris Stephens, and there are numerous reports that he is the State Department official the State Department says was killed in that violence. And into CNN, we have some confirmation from an unidentified Greek contractor in the Benghazi consulate who does not want to be identified for his safety. He said he could hear RPG, those rocket-propelled grenade attacks last night. He said that 3 U.S. Security personnel died with the U.S. ambassador. He said he saw all 4 bodies on the street this morning in Benghazi. He says the bodies are now in the central hospital in Benghazi, and he, adding this Greek contractor, telling CNN that more Libyans died as well. They were all shot on the spot there. Now, the Reuters reporting is that the ambassador and 3 other State Department workers were in a car. They were fleeing the attack. They were going to a more secure location from the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, and they were hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. They underwent a grenade attack as they were an RPG attack as they were leaving the facility. We're still waiting for State Department confirmation. We know last night that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that their thoughts and prayers are with the State Department official who was killed in that violence, but we didn't know who that was. This morning, putting the pieces together from various international news agency reports and our own reporting, again, from a Greek contractor in Benghazi, it was indeed Chris Stephens, the U.S. ambassador to Libya, a man who was appointed to that post by the president just in May.
And, Christine, I'd like to bring in Peter Brooks. He's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, a former CIA officer as well. Mr. Brooks, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
What can you tell us about this situation?
Well, it's very troubling if true, and I'm supposed to appear later this morning to talk about what happened yesterday in Cairo and Benghazi. This obviously is an escalation, and you have to wonder whether this is related to 9/11 or to the attacks on the consulate yesterday in Benghazi. But obviously, very troubling if true, and it really reminds us that we live in a dangerous world.
Did you know the ambassador?
No, I did not. I did not know the ambassador, and gosh, our thoughts and prayers are with obviously with his family if this is tragically true.
Now, as you mentioned Cairo, and we were taking a look at all of the protesters there, we know that, we have no confirmation that these 2 attacks are related. And we know that this was a protest that happened at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, unlike the gunfire that we're hearing about in Benghazi. But do you think that they are connected somehow?
There's a possibility of it. I mean, you have to realize that yesterday was the 11th anniversary of 9/11. And then there's, that's certainly, I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, but they did take place at the same time. Sometimes these groups do work together, but my sense is that they may not be necessarily coordinated, but clearly based on a very important date in American history.
Yeah, I know, because in Cairo, what you saw was a lot of flag burning, a lot of very angry protesting. In Benghazi, though, there have been these other attacks against American and British facilities and personnel throughout the summer, really, and they're armed to the teeth in Benghazi.
I think, we certainly have to pay attention to while we're in this very important political season, we certainly have to pay attention to what's going on overseas. There's no doubt about that, and certainly will remind Americans. And we also have to be very cautious in our foreign policies and, of course, in the protection of American citizens and American interests abroad.
And what do you make of this film? Do you think that there is some sort of a connection here with the radical Islamists and what's happening at both places?
I think there's still a lot of rage about the United States in that part of the world, and it's very, very unsettled politically. You think about it, it's kind of ironic, these horrible attacks on American interests and American citizens after what the United States did, for instance, in Libya, and getting rid of the regime of Muammar Gaddafi, and moving away from the regime of Hosni Mubarak. I mean, it's interesting that, I think some people could certainly see this as quite ungrateful on the part of these individuals. So I think there's a confluence of different things here. This film, which I have not seen, the 9/11 situation, and the general unsettledness of the political situation in that part of the world.
Peter, you have experience with the CIA. You are a former deputy assistant to the Secretary of Defense. Clearly, you know the inner workings of the the government angle of this, you know, in the embassies.
Yeah.
What do we think is happening right now to American embassies around the world? We're getting no confirmation, nothing from the State Department really. Are they secure? Are they securing embassies? Are they securing consulates around the world? I mean, what kind of fire drills happening right now, do you think?
Well, there's a lot of fire drills. Obviously, the embassies and consulates, you're absolutely right, are very concerned about their security. They will be liaising with local officials to make sure that the embassies are protected, you know, because a lot of times the real security comes from local police forces and other security forces in the local countries, as well as the Marines that are posted there. They're also going to be talking to American citizens. They generally have a good list of American citizens that are residents in the cities where embassies and consulates are and in the countries, and they're probably going to be reaching out to them and telling them, giving them advice on taking protective measures for themselves and their families.
We probably have to be careful, too, officials, to be careful of inciting more violence or more attacks against American facilities and Americans around the world at this point. You don't want to embolden people a day after 9/11. You know what I mean? The extremist groups?
Right. And, of course, our intelligence folks are going to be really hustling, obviously, on the ground overseas and over here in Washington, because who knows what's coming next. I mean, in some ways, this is kind of like, you know, the 9/11 attack, obviously on a much smaller scale, but the sense is what's coming next? Is something else coming next? And so the intelligence people are going to be really hustling to find out anything they can to see if there's additional attacks in store.
I want you to stand by here for a moment, because CNN has confirmed now that the United States ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stephens, was killed in a rocket attack on the American consulate in the city of Benghazi on Tuesday. So we do have definite confirmation of that at this hour. And if we can go back and talk about the situation in Cairo and Mohamed Morsi not releasing a statement yesterday. What do you make of that?
Well, I think I'm disappointed. We have had a statement out of the provisional government in Libya, but I'm disappointed and I'm worried about that. I think that the government of Egypt has to come out and say things that will discourage and deter further actions against American citizens and American interests. The United States has reached out to this new government. There are American businessmen who were just in town, 100 or so American businessmen, to try to increase trade opportunities between the two countries. The U.S. State Department has talked about getting rid of $1 billion in debt that Egypt owes to the United States. I mean, we've done a lot for them, and I think it's important that he stand up. But, of course, I think if I were him, if I was trying to channel him, he's very concerned about making the Muslim Brotherhood look soft on some of these issues in the face of the actions of these more radical groups in Egypt. So I think he's got to do the right thing and stand up and say the right things about this violence. Protesting is one thing, violence is another thing. And at this point, I've not seen a statement, and I hope we'll see one soon.
All right, Peter Brooks, former Department Assistant Secretary of Defense, former CIA officer, thank you so much for being with us this morning and sharing your perspective. We appreciate it.
Again, the U.S. ambassador to Libya has been killed. This is according to our own reporting from CNN, from a Greek contractor who saw his body and the body of 3 others with him in the street after that rocket attack on the U.S. consulate yesterday in Benghazi. We'll be right back with more breaking news after this quick break.